Welcome to episode 8 of the Generation Hustle podcast, the show that explores the world of business, entrepreneurship, and current day issues impacting the millennial. I'm your co-host Amin alongside my buddy Sherston. On today's episode, we welcome someone whom a lot of you are familiar with, Swish Goswami. He is a serial entrepreneur, has given 3 TEDx speeches, is a UN youth ambassador, and what I personally like to call a serial networker. Today, he is the CEO and founder of Trufan, a social intelligence platform that helps brands activate grassroots communities made up of what they call superfans and micro-influencers, ultimately allowing businesses to grow and scale. Swish walks us through how he built his successful personal brand, why networking is so powerful, and how that ultimately led him to meet his idol, Gary Vee, and finally, how brands can leverage social audiences to grow their business. So let's get right into it.
Hey Swish, how's it going?
Doing well. I was literally on the Hangouts. Sorry, I just clicked the Hangouts immediately because I
Oh,
thought that's where we were gonna meet. But that's my bad.
Okay, no worries, buddy. Super happy to have you on. The man, the myth, the legend, Swish.
Yeah, absolutely, man. I'm excited. I'm actually back home in Calgary right now, so I'm just my mom's like going through and cleaning a bunch of shit. So I'm kind of in my room right now, and it's such a humid day in Calgary. It's so warm, so crazy, but
Dude,
it's nice to be back home for a few
warm
weeks.
is it? Like Toronto's having a heat wave of itself.
Oh, really? Yeah, it must maybe not a heat wave, but like I woke up and I thought it was at least like 27, 28
Oh
degrees.
no, where?
Crazy.
Dude, yesterday I was riding my car and it felt like 37. Like,
oh my god.
Yeah, in my dash it's at 37 degrees. I was like, damn.
And the thing about Toronto is it's quite humid. Toronto's quite humid, so
yeah, the lakefront really makes it really bad.
Yeah.
All right, dude, man. Again, happy to have you on. Really excited to share your story. A lot of people obviously know you from LinkedIn, Trufan, and a bunch of other places. You've done a lot in such a short period of time, so it's going to be great to share these experiences.
Totally. No, appreciate you having me on. Let's get this going.
Sweet. So let's just start off with, say, your days in high school and university, right? So you had a passion for debating and you became quite successful at it. So describe to me the experience that helped you foster your storytelling, because we know that your personal brand has been able to allow you to get a lot of opportunities elsewhere. And so how's that, say, debating skill allowed you to build that personal brand?
Sure, yeah. I mean, debating helped in a lot of ways. I think in junior high and high school, it definitely helped with my confidence. It helped with how I go about talking to people, which is obviously so important when you're trying to build a brand or try to build a business and pitch people on it. So all of that really came into play, I think. Past just even that though, like I think the mere fact that I was able to meet some pretty smart people through debate helped a lot in terms of some of the early projects I was working on in high school or as well as in university. So I definitely think that like debate as a whole helped a lot. And I definitely want to make sure that, as I continue to like kind of go into university and as I continue to go into like, even my career, I was constantly still like doing things that were basically debating, but in a less formal setting, like challenging assumptions, making sure that like I was asking why, listening to people. These are all the things that you learn from debate that came into really good use when I was running my company.
Sweet. And so if you were to kind of describe how to become a better storyteller, what would you kind of tell an individual that's starting their business or even building their own personal brand?
I think the first thing is authenticity is really important. And that word is obviously thrown around a lot these days. So not a lot of people even know what it is, but authenticity is essentially like, look, if you want to put on a facade of who you are, it's likely not going to be authentic, right? You're not going to convince the masses that this is who you are if you're not even able to convince yourself. So the first thing is kind of understanding who you are, what drives you, what's your why, what do you love doing, and being able to try to convey that in as original a format as possible, whether that's through video, whether that's through writing, whether that's through a podcast. That's entirely up to you. The medium of how you express yourself is entirely up to you. But try to pick a medium that plays to your strengths and allows you to really just feel comfortable with sharing your story or what you're doing in the most natural and proper way. So that's number one. I think number two, when it comes to storytelling, is try as much as possible to loop people into that story. I don't think that anyone's ever become successful on their own purely. So the cool thing is when you're able to kind of bring other people into your story, you should absolutely try to credit them. You should absolutely try to mention them and, really make them a part of the content that you're sharing online, especially if you're trying to storytell on platforms like LinkedIn. And I think the third and final thing is just to be responsive to your community, right? Like a lot of what storytelling is responding to feedback that you get, what resonated with your community, what didn't, and then try to replicate things that did. So listening, engaging with your community is something that's equally as important as just constantly churning out content and telling stories.
Right. And so you got quite popular on LinkedIn. And so you started, I want to say maybe 4 years or maybe a little earlier. So why LinkedIn, and how did you kind of successfully take that personal brand and really excel at it? I know storytelling was a huge part of it, but kind of what was your strategy on LinkedIn?
Yeah, I mean, look, on LinkedIn, my main strategy was, trying as much as possible to share what the day-to-day life of running a business is. And more importantly, even past the day-to-day life of running a business, what is it like just being a student that is still unsure of what they want to do? So I try to pick topics that were relatable to students that were kind of around me. I was obviously in second year when I started on LinkedIn. And so a lot of what was really resonating with my audience was not knowing what they wanted to do, not really knowing what their passion was, procrastination, not really eating properly, right? Like there were just a number of things that came into play there. And so it was really, really great for me to start writing content about that. And these were as it is things I was thinking about. It wasn't like random ideas that I had. These were things that I was thinking about that I was constantly looking to share. And now when I had a medium to be able to share them really easily, I was just super, super happy with that. So I think past that, I started then going through and setting up a bunch of events. I wanted to meet the people that I was seeing online. I wanted to meet them in an offline setting. So did a couple of LinkedIn local events, started working with 3 other people internationally to kind of co-found this organization called LinkedIn Local. We've put events on now in 800 cities around the world, including Shanghai, Singapore, Mumbai, Calgary, Toronto, a lot of places in the US. So that was a really cool experience just to be able to start something, see it, from a seed level grow into this international event organization that was being used across LinkedIn by so many members of the platform. And I also started then through those events meeting other people that were putting out content on LinkedIn. So what I did is try to build videos with them. I tried to go and write articles with them. I essentially tried to do anything that allowed me to collaborate with them so that we could start cross-pollinating our audiences in a very, very seamless way.
I see. I love the part where you said you're collaborating with other individuals who have been successful in it, because that kind of also it's like doubling down the networking effects, right? So totally like that. So from there, you've also done like TED Talks, right? And so describe to me the experience of what it's like to give a TED Talk, and is it like intimidating sometimes? Because I know it's it's a pretty big stage, and you want to be as perfect as possible.
Yeah, I mean, so the first TEDx talk I gave, I was in first year university, and I definitely was a little bit nervous. But I think the biggest thing for me was as much as possible just trying to remember like, what is it that I really want to convey and why is that so important? And so I did memorize a speech for that one, which is unorthodox. I normally never memorize a speech, but I memorized the speech, went out there. I think like halfway through my speech, I just forgot what the speech was and just started like going off what I remembered the speech to be. But then for the second and third TEDx talks that I gave, I didn't come in with a memorized speech. I came in with a couple of ideas, went up, my second one, I literally delivered it with like a hat on in like the most informal way possible. And I liked it because again, I was talking about issues like storytelling or mental health, which just allowed me to connect, I think, a lot better with my audience.
Sure. Yeah, that was great. And like, I want to pivot and understand, like one aspect of that is, and you mentioned it right now in how you started your audience on LinkedIn, because a lot of the people that you're connecting with was students who weren't sure what they were doing or anything like that. So what I want to understand from you is that, like, can you explain to us your drive from a young age? Because, and this is something that I like to do with all of our guests. I like to go back and just Google your name and kind of find things that you posted out. And I found an old tweet of yours where you're quoting your brother as saying, or he was telling you, if you add 5 years to your age and double it, you're still younger than our mom. So what's the rush? So
yeah, exactly.
On that and like kind of tell us that philosophy.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, look, like I think a lot of times, like you get caught up and you want to rush into starting something because you feel like the whole world is against you, in the sense of like, you know, time is going by, you're not doing much, and you know, like you're kind of racing against time, if you will, to prove yourself. So in those moments, I like to remember those words because it's so true. Like, you know, there is a lot of time. As long as you're really willing to stay patient, there's a lot that can come to you. Along with that, though, on that kind of same note, I think what's equally as important is trying to remember that just having drive isn't enough. Like, I think, you know, kind of in my high school and university days, I definitely had that drive to do things, but it didn't always translate properly into action. So one thing I really want to be able to do was, how do I take that drive that I have and translate it into proper action? So i.e., like, how do I go about creating things off my drive, trying to inspire other people to join and start something with me and be a part of an initiative that can have a broader impact. So that was something that I had to learn the hard way. I think, you know, like, again, when I was a child, like, I used to write up a lot of business plans. I used to pretend like I was running a lot of companies just because I wanted to kind of feel that sensation of running something.
Right.
But then when I actually got really into the weeds and started to understand what it took to run a company, I realized that drive isn't enough. Like, you need more than just drive. I think start a company, you need to have skills like persistence. You need to have skills like being able to be patient. And that is associated, in my opinion, with drive, but just simply having drive isn't enough.
For sure. So then, just to go off of that, how do you, like, what do you define a success for when you're starting at such a young age like that? Because like you mentioned, yeah, drive and enthusiasm is good to have, but it's not enough. So like, what benchmarks do you place there instead to measure success at that age?
Yeah, at that age, I think what you're trying to do is learn as much as possible. So the opportunities you take on, you're trying to see, like, does this allow me to go deep into an area that I foresee being a big part of my life going forward, right? So for me, like, started a nonprofit in high school, which I think was awesome because it allowed me to use my debate network to go and chat with debaters and see, hey, are you interested in putting an event on in your city that can help fundraise for an issue that we're trying to solve, i.e., young people weren't having their ideas funded. What if we built a fund that all young entrepreneurs could really go towards if they wanted to get, you know, $1,000, $1,500, $2,000 to be able to fund their project? In university, I started a food delivery app, right? It was called Food Share. That didn't work out. It was with my best friend Quinn, but that idea taught me a lot about how to go from having an idea to a prototype, especially like an app, and being able to then pitch that, get feedback, iterate, and then really trying to understand how to scale that past just a V1 into a proper product that people could use. And that came into play later on when I started Trufan, right? So I think even some of the failed experiences that I had in the past, I can look at them and say, I learned something that I then used for Trufan. And in the same way that there are a lot of things I did wrong, even with Trufan, that I hope that in the next few businesses I start over the next 10, 15, 20, 30 years of my life, I'm able to draw upon experiences that started off with Trufan and became really good lessons and cornerstones for me.
For sure. I like that a lot. It's almost like it's almost like pivoting your failures or setbacks into kind of stepping stones to that next phase or next level or whatever that is, right?
Exactly. And I think, you know, it's cliche, right? But your greatest failures are also your greatest lessons. But I think what people don't mention there is that you also just have to be open to accept that. So you have to accept that it was a failure. And a lot of people live in this denial for a long time that, oh, it wasn't a failure. It just wasn't the right time, or wasn't the right idea, or didn't have the good co-founder, or, you know, we were way ahead of the time and the market wasn't ready. So number one is accepting that whatever you were trying to do was a failure. But I think past that is trying to understand, okay, what was the lesson I took away from it and how can I apply it the next time? And a lot of that also comes into, how do I remember that lesson? So for me, a lot of the times whenever I go through these sorts of failures or obstacles or bumps, I record them, I write about them. And that's where LinkedIn comes into play as well, right? It's almost like my diary of failures and successes, because I'm able to quickly put up a 400, 500 word post, get it out there. And now my community knows about it, but I also can remember it. It's etched in my memory really well. So that's the type of stuff I do. You know, if you want to look at like how deep I sometimes go into my failures, like I wrote an article on the first year of running Trufan and the second year of running Trufan. Both articles are anywhere between a 15 to 20-minute read each on Medium. And the articles go really deep into things that we did right, but also things that we did wrong. You know, like we had failed hires, we had product delays, we had a trademark violation in our first year. And we go really deep in that article talking about how stressful it was, but also how we could have done things to prevent those issues popping up in the very first place.
For sure. And one point on that I think is really important is like how you view failure. And like you said, it is cliche to say that, hey, it's just a lesson. But it's hard to have that mentality, right? So did you have a hard time developing that thought process in terms of like, did it take multiple setbacks, multiple issues to work through to be able to view it in that way? Or were you always like from the get-go, like, this is just another lesson. This is just another lesson. Like, what was there a transition there?
I think for us, like my brother and I, we grew up in a household where my mom constantly said that fail, like the acronym fail is actually first attempt in learning. And that's the way that she's taught us just growing up, you know, is that anytime you go about failure, think about it as this is the first time you're doing something, there's an opportunity to learn from it and move on.
Sure.
And to not also dwell on your failures, because I think a lot of times people think too hard about their failures where they're trying to pull way too many lessons from it and they're not focused on what they currently have or some of the future opportunities that they have. So I think there's a balance there, and definitely like I'm not perfect at that balance. I think there are times where I dwell on my failures a bit too much. There are times where I don't pull away too many lessons from it as well. But I think I'm starting to kind of hit that balance now, because a lot of times, especially when it comes to sales or marketing or product related to Trufan, the mistakes that we're making, you know, I just know that it's not going to be the only time we encounter that type of situation. You know, like running ads, for example, if an ad campaign didn't work, I know it's not the last time we're ever running ads for Trufan. I know we're going to do it more, right? So I know that I need to be as quick as possible to pull away lessons that we can then implement the next time, but I also can't dwell on those mistakes because there's way too many other fires to put out when you're running a startup.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I mean, you also look at that from an authenticity standpoint with you sharing these stories. It's hard to kind of share these failures. And so one thing I would call you or reference you as is a serial entrepreneur and a serial networker. And so a person who's passionate in meeting others and learning and sharing these experiences. So oftentimes young professionals struggle with acknowledging the importance of networking. So if you were to describe and give it maybe a 2-sentence definition of why networking is so important and what can young professionals do to become better at it, to meet like critical stakeholders.
Sure. I think, you know, in terms of why it's important, I do believe that in a world where job security is such an issue, like you could be fired at any time, a pandemic can happen, you know, a business can go under, economic situations politically, like they can factor into whether your company's laying people off or growing very easily, especially if you're working at a bigger company. I do think that a lot of times the best thing that you can do is build a network, because you can fall back upon that network to get back up quickly. So you can get another job quickly if you have a good network to go back on. You can go about getting introductions to the right people, the right clients, the right advisors, the right investors if you have a good network. So your network is really like your safety net, in my opinion. In terms of how to go about networking, I mean, the biggest advice I normally give college students especially is to just interview people. You know, if you run a podcast or if you run an article series on LinkedIn and Medium, I think you're doing yourself a great service, because you're able to go about meeting pretty much anyone. I think 99% of people in the world love talking about themselves. I always say I'm exhibit A. And I do believe that when you're able to go and send a message to someone, and instead of asking for coffee, which is what most people do, you say, can I interview you and share your story? I think you're more likely going to get a response, and that's more likely going to be yes. So that can be the foundation for a great relationship. I think when you interview someone and you provide them value up front, you're setting yourself up in a great way, because you are not taking time away from them, which is what you do when you ask them for coffee. You're actually giving them something right back initially.
Dude, that's so like relevant, because I obviously started with the whole coffee stuff early on through LinkedIn, and I noticed like obviously you had set up some meetings, some people are nice enough to obviously go ahead with it, but in terms of the longevity of that relationship, I guess it didn't last as long. Whereas the individuals I actually tried to interview and have a long-term discussion or some sort of partnership involved, I still talk to them today. And so I think you're spot on when you say, look after their interests as well, not only your own. And through that, you've actually met your idol, Gary Vee. So describe to me how exactly you did that, because me and Sherison are huge Gary Vee fans as well. And so what was that experience like, and as a fan and also like as a professional?
Yeah, I mean, look, I started watching Gary's videos. Man, this would be like first year university. I started watching his videos, and at that time too, note that like he was at 300,000 followers on Instagram. He hadn't blown up. It wasn't like the world knew who he was. I watched this one talk he gave at the University of Southern California. I loved how authentic he was, and by that I mean like he just wanted to provide as much value as possible. He wanted to share as much of his insights and lessons and experiences with no filter whatsoever, and I really liked that. He didn't seem like he was shielded by any sort of like, oh my God, I have a company that I need to protect or an image that I need to protect. Like he was just very blunt and open about sharing his opinion about anything. So I think that's what kind of drew me to him. And then I remember sending him a few emails, and he didn't get back to the first couple until I remember sending him an email saying like, hey, look, I'm this young entrepreneur. I really, really look up to you. I'm coming to New York because I'm speaking at this event. Would love to be able to meet you. So I remember finally I think they just got fed up probably with the amount of emails that he was getting from me. and he just passed it on to his assistant, Tyler. Tyler then set up a meeting. And so when I was in New York, I was attending this UN event. I met him on the first day I landed in New York, and met him for 15 minutes. I kid you not, it was a 15-minute interview. The interview I think is also publicly available on YouTube now if you just search up like Gary Vaynerchuk meets young fan or something.
Okay.
But it was awesome. Like it was a great meeting. At that time, I hadn't started Trufan. I wasn't speaking that avidly. I wasn't, part of a bureau. I hadn't invested in any companies. I wasn't even posting that much on LinkedIn. I hadn't had like a big following on Instagram or anything like that. So there was a lot that was really cool just to see like the questions I was asking then, I think was like trying to get him honestly to convince me that like law school and university might not be the right path for me. And if you watch that interview, you kind of see that like that's what I was telling him, being like, I'm in college, like, I think this is the path that I want to go towards. And then like he could sense that I wasn't passionate about it. He could sense that I didn't like that. And so that was awesome. Like, being able to then meet him, and then I think a year after I was able to speak with him in Toronto at an event called Haste and Hustle. I met him again in his the organizer thought it'd be funny just to put me in his car. And so I surprised him when he got into his car after his talk. We chatted a bit there. And then when I was in New York after second year, after going to New York, I became really close friends with some of his team members. So D-Rock, obviously, Tyler, Andy, being able to obviously be roommates with Elliot, who used to run his social media. That was awesome. So I started becoming very close to his team and started to understand, why Gary is who he is, which is he just has fantastic people around him as well.
That's amazing. That's amazing. So could we say that meeting Gary is kind of what led you to Trufan?
In a way, like I think it definitely set up a lot of pieces towards that. I think if I didn't know about Gary, I wouldn't have met Elliot. If I didn't meet Elliot, I wouldn't have, been a co-founder for Dunk, which is what he started in 2013, which is this big Instagram page. And if I hadn't done that experience, I wouldn't have known that much about influencer marketing and how that world works, which is basically what Trufan was built on. So sure. I do think at the end of the day, you could probably go back and funnel it all to Gary, but I think there were a lot of other pieces there that also kind of helped towards creating Trufan.
For sure, yeah, and I won't take any of that away from you. So can we let's switch into Trufan here, and can you tell us a little bit about where that idea came from outside of these conversations, and how you are helping brands making smarter marketing decisions?
Sure. So, initially I was working after I did a summer internship at a VC. This is after my second year of university. I was working at a VC called JB Fitzgerald. I became roommates with Elliot. Elliot had basically told Gary, like, look, I love working with you. I've done it for a year and a half now, but I kind of want to do my own thing, want to fully focus my time on Dunk. So we became roommates. I came on board as his co-founder for Dunk, helping out in the business end, so fundraising, business development, and very much trying to go about buying other Instagram, Twitter, and Snapchat accounts that we could add into our media network. Right. So we had about 21 accounts, including @Movement, @Curry, @The Hoop Films, @Dunks with an S at the end. And the whole play was working with brands to promote their content on our channels, because our audience was that 18 to 24 urban demographic that was really interested in basketball, but didn't tune into TV and got all their highlights off social media. So that's what we were doing. And one of our, advisors was Mark Zablo. He had run Cogent Marketing. He was at the time Chris Paul and Dwayne Wade's social media manager. And he messaged Elliot saying, "Hey, Elliot, like, do you have this, do you have a tool that could help Chris Paul find some of his most engaged fans in Houston?" So Elliot kind of brought me into the conversation. I told Mark, like, look, I don't think we have a tool like this yet, but it got me thinking, like, what if you were able to build a simple tool that any brand or celebrity could use to find their most engaged fans? Because then you could create an event around them, you could send them discount codes, you could reward them, and you could empower them to advocate on your behalf. And that's the type of word of mouth marketing that I think is just perfect, is having a bunch of advocates talk about you, even for free. So that's what we did initially. We built out the software. I didn't do this project with Elliot. I decided to kind of back out of Dunk. Elliot continued with Dunk, but I had a co-founder who was at the time at Stanford finishing up his second year, Onik. And after Onik finished up second year, we started a company in Vancouver. We raised money. Our initial 500,000 came from a few NBA players, a few media executives like Jason Robbins from DraftKings, a couple of angel investors in Canada like Michelle Romanov and Andrew DeCisa from Clearbank, Manny Pat at New Avenue Capital. And so we try to build out this initial platform that would just help any brand or celebrity find who their top fan is. Kind of 2.5 years later now, where we're at is we're a team of 20 people. We do more than just help you find your top fans. We help any brand make smarter marketing decisions. So identifying your most valuable followers, being able to go through and vet influencers, going and looking for influencers on our database of over 2 billion followers that we have, and then also being able to go through and compare your audience to other social media audiences. So we're a really powerful social intelligence platform. We're very affordable as well, which is why we're able to cater to the small business market and not just the Fortune 500 companies that many of our competitors only focus on.
For sure. And I think your company provides that new avenue for marketing in terms of switching from big media advertising to micro influencers who actually provide, I would say, a bigger presence to their audience and kind of puts you in front of their audience, name to face, right? So can you speak 100%. To that? Yeah, sorry. So can you speak to that as well, like in terms of the growing influence of micro influencers and how important they're becoming to brands?
Yeah, I mean, look, at the end of the day, I think micro influencers are way better to work with than the traditional model of influencer marketing, which is let's just pay people with millions of followers that don't even buy from us and are just random. Mm-hmm. So one thing we allow you to do on our platform is go through your audience or go through your competitor's audience or go through your category's audience, whether it's dance or basketball or fitness or whatever it is. And you can really pinpoint people that they might not have millions of followers, but they might have 30, 40, 100,000 followers. They have way better engagement rates than the people that have millions of followers. They might have even bought from you already because they follow your account and you didn't even know that. Right. And on top of that, I think what's great is when you go through our platform, you're immediately able to see who their followers are. That influencer, do they have followers in New York or Toronto or LA? Do they have an audience that is very similar to our current audience? So are we working with them just to hit the same audience again, or are we hitting a new audience? So a lot of this kind of decision making kind of is backed up now by data when you use our platform in terms of which influencers to work with and how to work with them.
For sure. And that was a beautiful segue into kind of like the next area that I wanted to explore with this business and marketing with influencers is the amount of data that you're responsible for. And that's brought up a lot of conversations around data reform and how we can handle this. So one thing I wanted to understand from you is how we can handle big data moving forward in the future, because right now there's a lot of conversation around creating an environment where we can actually monetize our own personal data, not just brands that do the marketing, but me, myself at an individual scale. If I'm selling data to so many companies, I should be paid for that, right? So that's a conversation that's starting to come up. And can you give me your take on that and your take on this kind of direct transactional nature of personal data?
Yeah, look, I think at the end of the day, like privacy is really important now more than ever. I think, in my opinion, people should be able to benefit from their data. Like one idea that I've thought about a lot is, can you self-monetize your data? Because it's actually interesting. There's a lot of conversations around like a universal basic income, for example, and how if, the top 5 tech companies in the world, the Amazons, the Facebooks, the Googles of the world, if they paid a data tax, which I think they should, for utilizing the data of individual people, then you'd be able to fund a sustainable universal basic income program simply off the data tax that these top 5 companies would have to pay yearly. So it makes me think that, okay, if that's not going to happen, what else can we do in terms of helping individuals benefit off the data that they're giving? And sure, you know, you might argue that, hey, like we give our data to Google, but then in return, Google gives us the benefit of using their products. But I think data is obviously the most valuable resource now in the world. And it's statistically shown that it's a more valuable resource now than even oil. So the question becomes, how can individual people take control of their data? And that's what I love about what we're doing, is we're actually giving you access to your data. We're not having brands or individuals now reliant on Facebook and Instagram to advertise and hope and plug their nose that, oh my God, hopefully the algorithm works and we hit the right people. No, we're giving you access to your data, to data that you should have access and control over in terms of who your audience is, how to target them, where they come from, what they're interested in, all of that in one seamless platform.
For sure. And I think that's the future and where we're headed. And I think that's the future of marketing, because the more direct and upfront you can be with the audience that you're trying to reach, is the more the more conversion that you're going to get from those processes, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So in terms of looking ahead into where this is going to go, how do you think individuals and brands as well should manage their privacy around this? Like, privacy norms are consistently changing, especially in this environment. So what do you foresee in that area in terms of how we can manage those concerns?
Yeah, I think terms and agreements, for example, those should be a lot shorter. I actually proposed a number of times to certain app developers that, you know, have a long terms and agreement sheet if you want, but then have like some summarization technology in the back end that allows me to click next and then just see like the top 3 or 4 takeaways from that terms and agreement sheet, so I can accept that as well. So not only do you accept the longer terms and agreements, but then you accept 3 or 4 sentences that summarize the biggest takeaways from that terms and agreement sheet, that allows you to be informed of what you're really signing up for and what sort of access you're giving. The second thing is, I think there are platforms out there now, I forgot the name, I remember seeing one recently, that allow you to see where you've given your data off holistically, like across the board, like which platforms are you signed up with, where's your data going, and how is it being used? And you can turn on and off your permissions based on that. So these types of platforms, I think, are smart. I think more and more people should know about where their data is being used and how it's also being used, and should be able to have the ability to turn it on or turn it off. So that's kind of my thoughts on that. You know, like at the end of the day, with what we're doing at Trufan, we're staying very clear from private data. We only work with public data. So if you have a public Instagram profile or a public Twitter profile, we can go in and run an analysis for you on your followers and give you that access. But if you're a private account, you're not going to be able to do that, because that's not the type of access we've been given, nor is it the type of access we even want in the very first place.
For sure. And you touched on that. Like, I think there definitely needs to be more awareness and education around this, because it's finding that fine line between managing a social presence and your audience, but also managing the data that you're putting out there, because it is sensitive at the end of the day.
Yep, exactly. And so look, like, I also think data rights is not, how do I phrase this? Data rights is like not the most, it's a relevant issue for sure, but it's not like the most important issue on people's minds right now. I think there are a lot of greater issues that people are thinking about, and that's, you know, maybe even rightfully so, but I do think we have to sort this out at some point. Like, I think we have to sort out how do companies use our data? How do we benefit from that transaction? How do we go about controlling our data and making sure that it's not exploited in ways that we don't want? And again, when I say that last sentence of how do we make sure that our data is not being exploited in ways we don't want, that is subjective. Some people are very fine with their data being used in several different ways, and some people aren't, which is why we need to build a flexible model to be able to allow people to set permissions and allow them to consent to giving data in some situations, but not in others. And that's not a model that we currently have right now.
And hopefully we eventually get to that point, because if you've seen the kind of models of how much data is being collected over the last like 4 or 5 years, I think it's like what, like maybe like the last couple of years totals like the last 50 years of data collected or something like that. I think it's huge, and I think you're right and you're spot on. There has to be I guess a better structure moving forward, and so with that being said, you also have a deep understanding of the social audience. You have your own personal brand, and you also run Trufan, and so in many instances, brands are using influencers for marketing to grow their business. So if you were a business, describe what you're trying to look for in terms of forming a partnership with an influencer, and like, what are some common mistakes you've probably seen that result in a failure in the partnership and the influencer business relationship not really working out?
Great question. I think there's kind of two answers there. Number one is I see a lot of brands that are working with influencers, and they're working with influencers without checking their following, without checking where their followers are located, what their followers are even saying, who their followers are. So that's the type of analysis, again, you can do on a platform like ours. There's other platforms you can do it on as well. That's not a unique feature of ours, but it's important, I think, to do your due diligence, especially if you're putting in a lot of money into influencer marketing. It's making sure you're working with the right influencers that have followers in areas that you genuinely care about, and have followers that are actually like a new audience. You're not hitting the same audience again and again and again. You're hitting a new audience, because that, in my opinion, is the greatest benefit of working with influencers, is being able to hit new audiences in a very authentic and seamless way. I think the second big thing to think about when it comes to partnering up with an influencer is trying as much as possible to get the influencer to give you expectations around what they think is reasonable, right? Like a lot of times, a lot of brands get into influencer marketing. They expect, oh my God, like my followers are going to grow by like 2,000 and we're going to get like XYZ conversion numbers, but it's not reasonable. So ask the influencer upfront, what do you think is reasonable to expect from this campaign? And then hold them to that, right? Because when you phrase it like what's reasonable, hopefully the influencer won't give you an like outlandish answer. They'll give you a general answer based on what they've seen work with some of the previous campaigns maybe that they've run, and you can go in with proper expectations into how that campaign is going to roll out and work.
That's a great point. And I think there's a lot of problems, especially with like the large influencer pages. I have a friend that runs a protein pancake company, and he partnered up with a chef that had over 500,000 followers, but her followers happened to be more like moms or middle-aged individuals, and he paid a pretty penny. I'm not going to disclose how much. Let's just say it's a pretty penny, and in return, he had a conversion rate of less than 1% on the money that he put in. And just goes to show, like Swish, the point you mentioned, you have to research who you're partnering with, and also set reasonable expectations with the individual, because you can get into a pretty bad position if you don't do that.
Yeah, 100%.
And so outside of influencer channels like Facebook also and Google, we obviously have Trufan, which is an amazing platform, but what are great ways of increasing reach for your brand?
Yeah, I think working with influencers is obviously great in terms of trying to reach a new audience and bring them into your community and hopefully expand your community through that. I don't think running paid ads is a great way of expanding your reach, because again, it's like having a stim and just doing it like once off and not really building a sustainable community. Like unless you run paid ads for every single post, you're not actually really expanding your reach. Because what I think expanding your reach really comes down to is the organic numbers that you're able to reach every single time you post and don't promote. I think other ways to do that right now in the world that we live in, you can't run physical events to bring your followers out and to activate them, but you can definitely run virtual events over Zoom or over Hangouts or over Webinar Jam. Try as much as possible to do that monthly, because it's a great way to even have 5, 10, 15, 20 followers of yours come into a room, talk to you, get to know you, and then advocate on your behalf. It's exactly, by the way, what I did on LinkedIn. Is I tried as much as possible in the early days to have a 5-minute call with every single person that commented on my post, so that they got to know who I was on a more personal level. And the next time they saw my post, they'd more likely comment on it, like it, share it, really try to like talk highly about me because they knew me. And I think the third and final thing you can do to expand your reach is put out really good content, right? And again, like that's subjective. It's very subjective on what your category is, who are the type of people you're trying to reach. But, you know, if you're in the basketball space, for example, you're either going to win in two ways. One, you're going to win in terms of timing, which is what I think House of Highlights, for example, does, is they are the quickest to post content. The reason they do so well is because they have a deal with Bleacher Report. They got bought out by Bleacher Report, so they have the rights of Bleacher and Turner, and they're able, like the minute that LeBron James hits that dunk, they are able to upload that and post it, right? So if you're not able to win on timing, what you need to then be able to win on is, how do I go about taking that dunk that LeBron made and put it into a more interactive, humorous, and engaging way, right? And that's where memes come into play, video highlights come into play, video edits come into play. Are you able to put out something that just looks really cool and is engaging? And that's where you can also win. So timing and quality of content, I think, kind of go hand in hand. But at the end of the day, I think your content is going to speak for itself. You know, if you put out good content, it is going to get picked up, not only by people, but by other pages potentially.
That's a great point. That's a great point. And so with social media, there's also some negative effects, as we all know, and especially impacting the current generation. So like in your personal experience, how do you kind of separate your digital presence and your physical life? And then can you describe like how you protect yourselves from, say, the negative effects of social media?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think, I don't put out everything of my life on social media. Like I definitely used to. I think in second year of university, as well as when I had just started off at Dunk in New York, I was sharing a lot about my personal life, whether it was kind of my day-to-day life that I was sharing on Instagram via stories, or whether it was just writing every single day on LinkedIn. If you go through my LinkedIn, for example, now you'll notice I don't write every single day. I kind of got to this point where like now I only write if I really feel like it, if I have something to say, if I have news that I want to share or spread, I go on LinkedIn and I write about it. So that's something that I think has really helped me in terms of managing my mental health, in terms of making sure that I'm not in this constant race of like, I need to post, I need to post, I need to post, and get bigger, 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 but also just to enjoy what I've built, which is this awesome community of people that I can draw upon now to get advice from, to get help, to get support, to get advice. So that's something that I enjoy doing. I think the second thing is, you know, I have friends around me, family members around me that keep me very grounded. And that also helps, right? You know, like you have a personality online, but your personality online might be different than your personality offline, just because the people in your offline world are very different than the people in your online world. So that's very true for me. I think online, you know, I have awesome supporters, and that's not to say I don't have awesome supporters in my offline world, but in my offline world, I also have my most powerful and loving critics. And that is an amazing feeling as well, to have people that hold you accountable, they hold you in check, they make sure that you're going down the right path.
For sure. And you said it right there. Your offline life has your harshest critics. And maybe that's your friends, your family, or other areas that you're involved in. And that's where I kind of want to ask you about. You're big on social advocacy, and you're a UN Youth Ambassador. Can you tell us about the projects that you're involved in now with that status, and kind of why it's important to you and what impact this has thus far in your life?
Yeah, I mean, look, when I became very involved in the UN, I was going through, and this would have been second year of university. I was writing a research paper with a former British diplomat, Thomas Fletcher. So one of the early projects I did was how the UN could cope with digital technology and adapt to it, because, you know, it's ironic. The UN talks a lot about digital technology and how countries need to advance, but their own technology is very archaic, you know, like from the laptops and computers and speakers and microphones they use, it's just so archaic. So how can you go about efficiently modernizing that was one of the early projects I worked on. And then from there, I've gone and advocated for the UN Youth Assembly every single year. I've spoken at that event now twice. I've been an attendee as well in my first year of that event. And so I love that event because of kind of how it allows you to kind of put yourself in front of a global community and just meet awesome people, awesome young people that are looking to do big things, but they're just from every part of the world. So it's incredible to hear their perspectives and to hear kind of like what they're going through, and hear a lot about their struggles, but also their hopes and their ambitions. And it's an amazing community to be able to draw upon. And I think for the biggest benefit it's had for me as well is like, whenever you think about an idea now in a global context, I'm able to draw upon people that I know in the world to say, hey, what do you think about this idea? Do you think it'll fly in your city, your country, your continent? So that's something that I currently do. I don't do much, I think, past that. I think for me, like a lot of the day-to-day work as a part of being a UN Youth Ambassador are kind of gone. And obviously purposefully as well, because I'm running Trufan now full time and it's ramped up significantly. Like we've gone from being a team of 13 to a team of 20 in 3 months since the start of COVID. We've picked up about 550 more customers. We've rolled out these transactional plans, which means any individual or brand in the world can sign up for a plan anywhere between $24 and $199 a month. So this is all stuff that I need to now think of in terms of where we're going as a company. How do we continue to support our employees? How do we continue to grow? That has made it so that I can't really devote much time to, my role as a UN Youth Ambassador or even speaking or anything really else.
For sure. Yeah. You got your hands in a lot of jars, and
yeah,
we appreciate it because we can watch this kind of journey and be inspired by it, but also we understand, obviously, you got to prioritize what's important, right? And that kind of brings us to where we want to go now. Obviously, we've grilled you enough on your career and your goals and things like that, but we want to understand a little bit more of you, you as a person, and you behind the scenes, which I know you try to hide on socials. So maybe we'll get some insight here. So we like to do like a little quick lightning round where we kind of just hit you with quick questions, and we give you about 10 seconds to just answer whatever comes up first in your mind.
Oh God, this is be dangerous, but all right, let's do it.
It won't be that bad. It won't be that bad. So we'll start with something easy. What is your favorite book of all time?
Ooh, that's a great question. I mean, not to sound childish, but Harry Potter and the Order of Phoenix. And then on a more serious note, 0 to 1 by Peter Thiel was the best book I've ever
yeah, that's my
read
favorite book too. Like it's such an innovative book. Like I love everything about it.
If people are listening, you should read chapter 4, which is called the last mover advantage. And that chapter really goes into why this whole notion of the first mover advantage is just so flawed. But that's just more of a preview. The book is so contrarian, which is what I think Peter Thiel really is he goes against convention, and the book goes against like some very common principles that were taught in school that he thinks just are bullshit.
I was gonna say I definitely read Order of the Phoenix, but I got to catch up on this book now.
Yeah. That's a more important book. So yes, good.
All right. So you've, like we said, you're a busy guy. You're involved in so many things. So you come home and you're tired, I'm sure. How do you unwind after a long day?
Call of Duty.
Nice. That was automatic. You didn't have to think about that one.
No. My co-founder and I are obsessed. Like when we were playing Black Ops 4, we got to the point where he actually became a master. So he was top 2% in the world. I was in the elite league, so I was top 15% in the world. And we were grinding like almost every night after we came back from work, grinded till like 1 a.m., went to bed, got up at 8, did the whole thing again. So we love that. We hate the new game. We hate Modern Warfare so much. We're excited for the next edition of Black Ops, but yeah.
I love it. All right. So outside of Trufan right now, what other companies excite you the most?
A lot. I mean, Clearbank in Toronto is so exciting. I think it's just such a smart idea to give money to entrepreneurs so that they can go about hiring and marketing and build out their company, but in a non-dilutive way, which helps a lot of founders, because I know a lot of founders that have raised a shit ton of money. They're celebrated on TechCrunch, but they feel like crap because at the end of the day, they only have like 5 or 6% of their company. Yeah. I also think that their companies like, Palantir, like they're going to be going into like an IPO stage, and they're so secretive, but they're so cool because I've read a few reports on Palantir and like how they're basically like what we do, but on steroids. Like they're just the most powerful data company in the world. And it excites me, but it also kind of scares me, but I'm excited they're going into an IPO now, and they're going to have to release a lot more information about their company and what they do. And that's going to be really exciting to look at. And then there are a lot of just nonprofits, like I think obviously like a lot of nonprofits have kind of sprung up due to Black Lives Matter. And I'm really excited about some of the initiatives that are being put out to help people that are protesting get out of jail, to help a lot of these, Black civil rights activists go through and get funding to be able to go and do tours and speak and inspire people. So that's the type of stuff that excites me as well.
For sure. So I've asked you about your end of the day, but now I want to ask you about the start of your day.
Oh, God.
What's the first thing you do when you wake up?
I check my phone, which is terrible. It's a bad habit, but I do.
That's the
I do
worst
check my
answer.
phone. Yeah, it really is. But it's the honest answer. Like I have my phone kind of like arm's reach around me. So like I turn the alarm off, plug my phone out, and then just like with my eyes kind of being half open, I try to look at my phone. And so I look at my phone, I get up, brush my teeth, have breakfast, and then get into my day. It's not the most glamorous start. I don't do meditation, yoga. Like I don't find my spiritual awakening at 8:15 a.m. or whatever. Like
Not
it's a
Jack
very
Dorsey style?
no, not at all, man. Like it's a very unglamorous way of waking up, but it's what worked for me. The one thing I do though, and I do this a lot more in Toronto than I do in Calgary. But in Toronto, I have a Sonos speaker in my bathroom. So I blast music at max volume, go into a cold shower, and it just wakes every part of my body up. So that's something I tend to do every single day.
That's it. We'll say that's the inspirational wake up way,
It is. Yeah, right there, right? Sonos speakers, blasting music with cold shower, done.
All right, so let's take a look at just from your experiences in your life, whether that's in your career or outside of your career. What is the best piece of advice you've ever received?
Michael Hyatt, who's a really good advisor in our company. He's been a personal mentor to me for now 3 or 4 years. He used to be a dragon on Dragon's Den, ran a company called Blue Cat that he sold for $400 million. I remember meeting him for the first time in first year of university, and he gave me the advice like, look, at the end of the day, what really matters more than making money are the relationships that you make. That was really important. The second big piece of advice that he gave me, actually more timely for COVID, is that you need to be a business that is helping businesses make money or save money if you want to survive a pandemic. So those are kind of the 2 biggest pieces of advice in the last couple of years, and both of them have come from Michael Hyatt.
Those have been great, and they've come to fruition pretty quick, right?
Yeah, in a way. I'm still a work in progress, but yeah.
And lastly, this is probably the most important question on the podcast. We like to grill all of our guests about this. Yay or nay to
Raptors. Oh, damn. No, I thought it was going to be
we can get to that too. We can get to that too.
Yeah. Yay to pineapples. I like my pineapples on pizza. I'm a big Hawaiian fan.
Damn.
We love it. We love it. So I don't know if you can like you had video on, but Amin is wearing a Raptors hat.
Yeah.
Oh no way! That's awesome. I love that. I am. So it's actually funny. I grew up as a Lakers fan because I was a big Kobe fan growing up. And so I used to. I know, man. Honestly, just that news shocked me and made me very sad for a long time. But I was a big Kobe fan growing up, and then I moved to Toronto for college, and I'm like, yeah, the Raptors, whatever. Like, we had like DeMar DeRozan and Valanciunas and Kyle Lowry, and I'm just like, this team always goes to the playoffs and just get knocked out. It's embarrassing. And then I went to Vancouver to start Trufan. Actually went to New York, and then definitely did not want to support the Knicks in New York. And then went to Vancouver. I'm like, shit, I don't have an NBA team here. And then when we moved back to Toronto, this was Feb of 2019. I was like, holy shit, Kawhi Leonard is here. What is happening? So I started to fall in love, I think, with the Raptors during that year. Obviously, like they had a bit of a bandwagoner because we won that year, I guess. But like the thing I think I like about the Raptors more than any other team in the league is like we actually have a team. Like we have depth. Like I feel like our 9th, 10th player on our team can be a part of our starting lineup and still be successful because the way that our team works is not around like 1 or 2 people. It's just a system. And so that was just awesome to see. Like Kyle Lowry can hit a big 3. Obviously last year Kawhi could play both sides of the court. Pascal Siakam has just been coming up. You got Marc Gasol, and I'm really excited by the way that he's leaned down now.
Yeah, it's skinny Marc Gasol.
Right, but it shows that he's serious about playing now for the next few years. It shows that he's actually serious about staying in the league and performing at a high level, which makes me really excited as a fan. So I'm super excited by the Raptors. I actually think like they're an underrated team going into this whole bubble situation.
Yeah, I think we've been underrated for like since inception.
A long time.
So, I mean, yeah.
At the start of the season, Sports Illustrated had the Raptors lower than the New York Knicks going into the season. I'm like, how do you have the defending champions lower than the New York Knicks going into the season? Come on.
Man, it's American reporting on Canadian
literally
teams, right? So
literally
biased.
Literally though. It's actually that is the problem.
And I think beyond the team, like our management and front office is way underrated. Like,
Masai's the guru, man.
yeah.
And he is, man. And Nick Nurse is the GOAT, you know,
Yeah.
like you take a look at their guys' experience, like it's fantastic. We have some awesome people in the front office. So again, like I think that this year will be cool. Like if we go far, I think we're going to shut a lot of people up. But I'm also scared, right? Because you got Giannis and Milwaukee.
Right. Hopefully,
Probably the best team in the East.
yeah, hopefully we do a back-to-back and we have Drake sing the song.
Is Drake allowed in the bubble? I actually didn't know that.
I don't know. He probably can make his way there, right? So he's like, I'm an ambassador or whatever, but he'll probably do that. But
he can just buy the bubble.
That's true.
Property. Yeah.
That's true. Oh, man. Well, yo, Swish, we want to really thank you for your time here. It's been an absolute pleasure. You gave us such great details, and you're really going to help a lot of individual listeners that we have in terms of, you know, the marketing, even possibly joining your company, because you guys are doing fantastic things, helping smaller companies, smaller influencers really grow their brands. And, you know, again, we appreciate your time and thank you a lot.
No worries. Thank you for having me. Yeah. No worries. Thank you for having me. This is awesome. Great energy between the two of you and awesome questions. And more than happy, by the way, if any of the listeners want to connect, feel free to reach out to me. I'm more than happy to, you know, get on a phone call or reply over LinkedIn message or Instagram, whatever it is. I'm more than happy to share whatever I know that could be valuable to you.
Yeah, for sure. We're always willing to give back as well. So we can definitely plug that in when we share the episode.
For sure. And to that point, I'm going to be one of those guys that messages you first. So don't worry. We'll bombard you.
Amazing. I'm excited.